It's Serial, one story told week by week. I'm Sarah Koenig.
My name is Hedley Thomas, and this is The Teacher's Pet.
I'm Phoebe Judge, and this is Criminal.
This is Up and Vanished, the investigation of Tara Grinstead.
What do all these audio clips have in common? They are all the introductions to popular true crime podcasts, all intended to captivate your attention. But how are they all so good? What is it about the most horrific acts of humanity that make us want to keep listening and listening and listening? I'm Bay Cohen, and this is The Why in True Crime. How do you produce your podcast?
I actually guess I bought all of the stuff, just myself. So we originally bought 2 microphones, 2 headphones. The microphones you can get for like $25 on Amazon, and then the headphones, you can get for varying amounts. Some people really want headphones that are going to be more expensive. If you're going to be spending a lot of time editing your podcast, I normally edit mine with my actual earbuds in, so it didn't bother me.
So really, what you're saying is there's not a ton of equipment required, and it was easy for you to do on your own.
Most people can do it. Most people could do it, actually, with even less than we did.
That was Emma Thorpe, a junior at University of Missouri St. Louis, and my good friend. She is the co-founder of SPEMA, the Homo Sapien podcast. As Emma said, producing her podcast was fairly easy. It takes minimal equipment and can be done in your spare time. If Emma can do it in her college dorm room, truly anyone can. The thing that makes podcasts so unique is not only their extreme accessibility to be listened to, but also their ease to be created. While other forms of entertainment, like books and movies, which can be consumed by virtually anyone, not just anyone can create them. It takes editors, publishers, and production teams, and lots of time and money. The fact that I am here recording a podcast goes to show how easy they are to produce. As a result of this, it's no wonder the world of podcasts have gained such traction over the past few years. According to podcastinsights.com, there are over 750,000 podcasts actively being produced across multiple streaming platforms. And 51% of the United States population has at one point listened to a podcast. I myself am no stranger to the world of podcasts. I listen to at least one a day. However, I don't just listen to any type of podcasts. I exclusively listen to true crime. According to CBS, true crime podcasts consistently rank among the top 50. It is without a doubt one of the most popular podcast genres. And today, I want to find out why. Listen to this clip.
For the last year, I've spent every working day trying to figure out where a high school kid was for an hour after school one day in 1999. Or if you want to get technical about it, and apparently I do, where a high school kid was for 21 minutes after school one day in 1999. This search sometimes feels undignified on my part. I've had to ask about teenagers' sex lives, where, how often, with whom, about notes they passed in class, about their drug habits, their relationships with their parents. And I'm not a detective or a private investigator. I'm not even a crime reporter. But yes, every day this year, I've tried to figure out the alibi of a 17-year-old boy.
That was the first few minutes of episode 1 of season 1 of Serial, a podcast hosted by Sarah Koenig and developed by This American Life. The podcast aired in October of 2014, and it was an instant hit. According to Apple, and reported by a 2014 CNN article, it was the fastest podcast to ever reach 5 million downloads. The first season of Serial, which focuses on the murder of Hae Min Lee, has been credited as the start of true crime podcasting. Although Lee was the victim of this particular crime, the majority of Serial's first season revolved around the relative guilt or innocence of Adnan Syed, Lee's ex-boyfriend, who has been in jail for her murder since 2000. The murder, which took place in Baltimore, Maryland in 1999, was very much like any other gruesome crime of the time. It was reported in the news and media for a little bit. Adnan Syed was convicted of the crime, and that was that. However, with Serial, Koenig essentially reopened the case, bringing it into the public light once again. In Katie Reif's article, Serial Didn't Invent True Crime, but It Did Legitimize It, she makes a comment on the fact that there were pieces of true crime literature as well as some podcasts before Serial, but writes, "There was something about the soothing sound of host Sarah Koenig's measured public radio-trained voice over chirpy piano music that gave middle-class liberals permission to obsess over the 1999 death of Maryland teenager Hae Min Lee in a way that they'd never obsess over other such cases, at least not openly." Something about Serial opened the doors for true crime and put it on the map. Serial has encountered some backlash. Reif writes, and alongside articles crowing about the boost Serial had given to podcasting generally, there were others painting the podcast as a highly problematic example of white privilege disseminated by out-of-touch liberals. Much of this controversy ties into the issues surrounding the obsession and marketing of true crime itself. In an article from This, written by Professor Marilyn McCann, she raises the question, but do they, true crime podcasts, help us better understand the justice system, or do they encourage bias by presenting carefully curated but incomplete information, and often just one side of very complicated stories? When listening to podcasts like these, it's easy to forget that these are real people, and their stories are not black and white. It is all too easy to insert inherent bias into retelling of these cases, skewing public perception. Remembering this when listening to podcasts like Serial will allow for the most informed listeners, and encouraging them to do research on their own in order to form their own opinion on the case. It's no surprise that most people choose to get their true crime fix through podcasts. You can listen in the car, on a run, doing laundry. It's the most convenient, cheap, and accessible form of entertainment. So we agree, people like listening to podcasts. But why true crime? In 2017, a violent crime occurred every 24.6 seconds in America. In 2018, there were 16,241 reported cases of murder or non-negligent manslaughter in the United States. The U.S. is no stranger to crime, and while crime rates have rapidly declined since the 1990s, the fascination around it has only grown. A phenomenon known as true crime obsession has begun in America and shows no signs of stopping soon. But this obsession, surprisingly, isn't anything new. The U.S. National Library of Medicine writes, "Ever since the invention of movable type in the mid-1400s, the public's appetite for tales of shocking murder, true crime, has been an enduring aspect of the market for printed materials. For more than 500 centuries, murder pamphlets have been hawked on street corners, town squares, taverns, coffeehouses, newsstands, and bookshops. Typically, a local printer would put together a pamphlet that claimed to be a true account of a murder, consisting of a narrative, trial transcript, and or written confession of the murderer before his or her execution. For as long as people have been murdered, people have wanted to hear about it. But this still leaves us asking why. Why do we enjoy learning about innocent people losing their lives? New York Times author Kate Tuttle would say it's because, at the most basic level, true crime satisfies that little kid desire to see beneath the surface of everything. Alana Mased, for NPR, would say, "Looking away from a problem doesn't make it go away, and looking at the problem directly doesn't mean easily or quickly solving it. But looking and continuing to look until the layers begin to peel back and reveal the issues at the core of such stories, the systematic inequalities, the co-option of certain stories for political gain, and rhetoric used to make some victims more real than others. That's the important work true crime can do." Katie Reif, who I mentioned earlier, would say that one of the key appeals of true crime stories, and this is also true of fictional thrillers and horror, is the vicarious thrill of observing someone else's mortal peril from a safe distance. That's especially true when one's own life feels unstable, as evidenced by the parallel rise in popularity of the horror genre in the politically volatile back half of this decade. A study was conducted by the Journal of Radio and Audio Media, which examined the motivations behind true crime podcast audiences. And the results claimed that women found entertainment, convenience, and boredom to be the top 3 motivating factors for listening to true crime podcasts. These motivations for listening to true crime match up with what I previously thought. More than anything, it's a form of entertainment that allows people to escape. Based on all the research I have done, I would say we listen to true crime because at our core, we as humans are scared. We are taught from birth to fear the things that could harm us as a survival instinct. When we hear our fears played out, it helps us better understand them and over time become less afraid. I know personally I feel more prepared should I come into a life-threatening situation because of listening to cases of true crime. However, the most interesting thing I found in my research was the extreme disproportionate amount of men to women listening to true crime. 73% of listeners were reported to be female. The demographic is overwhelmingly female, and I needed to find out why.
Why do you think women are attracted to listening about true crime?
We think that it's because women are so often portrayed as victims in the media, and women in particular like to think about something and understand it in order to overcome anxieties based around that.
That was a CBS interview with Kenyon Lang, Amanda Jacobson, and Lucy Fitzgerald, hosts of the true crime podcast entitled Wine and Crime. It was reported that 85% of their audience is female. Kate Tuttle would say in her essay, Why Do Women Love True Crime?, that men statistically are involved in violent crime in much larger numbers than women. When women are connected to crime, we're much more likely to be victims or survivors. Perhaps our fascination with these stories stems in part from wanting to learn from them. Women are drawn to these stories of survival, or even stories where we are the victims, because in them we see ourselves. Men often don't. We live in such a male-dominated world that I find it surprising that this genre is so highly marketed toward women, but it is. Georgia Hardstark and Karen Kilgariff are hosts of the true crime comedy podcast My Favorite Murder, the podcast that started me on true crime. Their slogan and the title of their new book is Stay Sexy and Don't Get Murdered, not something a man would be too keen on hearing. Here's an interview with Karen and Georgia from The Feed.
I think it also is a thing for women. It's not a feminine thing to like murder. It's not, it's not girly, it's not pretty, which, I don't know whether or not that's true. Who cares? Yeah.
I mean, really, who cares? Women surely don't. Women don't care about how their interest in true crime is perceived. Author Rachel Monroe just released a book this year entitled Savage Appetites, 4 True Stories of Women, Crime, and Obsession. In this book, she writes, there wasn't a simple, universal answer to why women were fascinated by true crime. Women are too varied for that. This made me laugh because it's so true. Women are just too complicated to explain the why, because you'd think the idea of listening to other women being raped and violently murdered would be horrifying, but for some reason, it gives women some type of strength. And Julia Davis, editor of Crime Monthly magazine, would say it's about compassion and about facing your fears. It's clear that there is a demand for true crime, meaning there is also a market. This is a highly profitable genre, and I would encourage people in the entertainment industry to take advantage of the growing popularity of true crime. As long as there is crime, there will be a market for those stories to be told in any capacity. As you can see from my research, there's a psychological desire for true crime, meaning it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I'm going to continue listening to true crime, and I hope that through this podcast I've inspired others to do so as well. Hopefully, through these podcasts and retellings of true crime stories, we can bring light and closure to the victims and their families of these acts of violence, and we can help ourselves along the way too. I'm Bae Cohen, and this has been The Why in True Crime.